Ladies and gentlemen, this is episode 17 of the For My Dogs podcast, and boy, the playoff bracket is set. Not just set, but set with a potential Georgia Bulldogs, Tennessee Volunteers national championship if both teams take care of business. So, hey, we got a lot to look forward to once this playoff gets kicked off. But as always, got my dog Johnny here with me today.
Cheers, everyone. Tucker,
Okay.
I should have turned down my headphones before you did that intro. I was not ready for that.
Hey, I'm fired up. I'm happy to be in the playoff. I mean, do you know how long it's been since we have competed for a national championship or even been in that conversation?
Hey, and
big deal.
Georgia also normally loses in the SEC championship. So the fact that Georgia won is an amazing deal. And the all-star of that game was the one and only Dan Jackson. And he's been told, and everyone's been calling him Dan the Man. But Tucker, you and I both know that the real Dan the Man is a guy with us today, Mr.
That's
Dan
right.
Tilley. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great, Johnny. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. But yes, you got, sadly, Dan, I'm sorry, VT did not make it into the playoffs, but you got two ACC contenders.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'll gladly invite both of you guys to my house to watch Virginia Tech in probably the Diamond Walnut Bowl. That will be played on a Tuesday night at 10 o'clock. So I expect both you guys to come and support us there. So.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was watching. You guys. Oh, thank you. I was watching the Virginia Tech Virginia game with you, Dan, and that was a lot of fun. Just seeing how much hatred you have towards Virginia, and then you guys just put it on them, and it was just awesome to see you celebrating.
It is, it's one game of the year I always look forward to, and it really doesn't matter how poor our season is. If we can beat UVA, then all is right with the world for another season.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. So for our listeners that don't know, Dan is born and raised in Blacksburg, Virginia, went to Virginia Tech. So he's Hokie through and through. And he's also just had a huge influence on me and Johnny. It's obviously Johnny's father-in-law. But as we've discussed, Haley and Claire's family are really close. So I've gotten really close with Dan too. And he is just a really successful man in his own trade and in his own business. He's what is your official title, Dan? I know it's changed recently.
Yeah, Chief Bottle Washer, right? So my official title, for those that are, that's important too, is Chief Sales Officer. I've been with our company 30 years, and it's like 3 10-year segments. I have 10 years in sales, 10 years in leadership, and then 10 years in senior leadership. So that's about as easy as I can break it down. And so that's what I do now. I oversee sales for the entire organization.
Yeah, and you do a great job at it.
Well, I've got a lot of good help. I can assure you that's why.
Well, I feel like that's one of the biggest pieces of leadership, right? Is surround yourself with people. They say surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, right?
Yeah, which is not hard for me actually. So it really boils down to surrounding yourself with like-minded people. That's the way I like to see it. Like-minded.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's exactly why we wanted to have you on the podcast today. We know you have a lot of wisdom to share when it comes to leadership and all that you've learned in the different seasons that you've been in. But before we get into that, let's just wrap up some college football talk from the weekend. Johnny, I know you have a lot of thoughts. Congrats on your SEC championship. Both of us were correct in our preseason prediction of who was going to finish at the top of the SEC. Now, the rest of it, who cares how we did on that? Okay, we at least got the number one right.
Do we need to take a moment of silence for Bama not being in, or should we just pass on that?
I think we should stomp on their grave.
There you are, back with the crazy stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
But listen, Tucker and I were talking about how we took a break for the holidays of Thanksgiving, and we texted and we're like, why did we take a break? This was like the most intense weekend of college football. 8 overtimes for Georgia. It was sloppy, but we got the job done. And then my quarterback says in an interview before this SEC game, he says, yeah, I don't really like watching football. And I was like, why is he our leader? Like, why is he the one who is leading us? And I hate that he got hurt. I hate it for him. But I love Gunner. I love the new guy. I cannot believe that call got reversed. I should have been targeting. His helmet came flying off. But he made completions. I mean, that's just like the big deal that we're struggling with Carson Beck. So, love the new guy on there.
He played great. He
Yeah.
played really well.
But here's the issue. And I told Tucker I had to rant about this. FSU fans are just blowing up social media, or at least my social media, about how since Carson Beck is hurt, then they should not go into the playoffs because it's only fair because that's the reason why FSU didn't go last year. And now listen, I hate that FSU did not go in last year. I think it was wrong. Tucker, Dan, you may have other opinions, but I thought that they got robbed for that. However, here's my thing. If you truly do think that you got robbed, then don't take all your, don't have your players go, and because they all left. A ton of players did not play that game. If we want to look back, it was 63-3 was in that game. If you truly believe that you should have been in there, then you should have proved it during that game. So please, FSU fans, stop talking trash about Georgia. That was last year for you. It's not the same. We deserve to be there. I hate you didn't, but you're not us. Just going to say that.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't compare the two situations because now it's a 12-team playoff.
Right.
Automatic bid if you win your conference championship. Like, if we had this in place last year when they went through that, they would have been in the playoffs. So they just need to.
Yeah, no, right.
But, and again, they have nothing to hold on to this season, so they're just holding on to what they feel like was them getting robbed.
Yeah, they hold on to the past. And they did awful. But hey, SMU got in. They didn't win their conference, but they still got in. So congrats to SMU for going in. And
yeah. Thank you, Clemson. I was rooting hard for Clemson because I did not want Alabama in the playoffs. So I'm thankful for Dabo Swinney and the Tigers on this particular day.
Boise State's in. I'm happy for them too. I got family out there, and there's a chance that Boise State and Georgia could play, and that'd be really cool for my family all the way out in Idaho for us to play each other like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the playoffs are just going to be incredible. Some of the matchups are really exciting. I love that we get an opportunity to play at Ohio State.
Yeah.
I mean, and on the Hot Takes episode, one of mine was that the Big Ten is so mediocre, and I'm glad we get a chance to go out and back that up.
Now, I wish they were playing.
Make it true.
I wish they were at Neyland.
I do too. But I kind of knew headed into the day that we weren't going to get a home game, so I love it. Let's go there and beat them.
Yeah,
I want to.
Yeah,
and then if we win, then we get to go play Oregon in the Rose Bowl, which is just going to be an awesome atmosphere. So I'm really excited about how things laid out. And it didn't even dawn on me, but literally, Johnny, if your team takes care of business and my team takes care of business, we're going to have a rematch, not just during the playoffs, period, but in the national championship. How wild would that be?
I would love that. And I'm glad that it'll be later on because in the beginning they were having Georgia and Tennessee play right off the get-go, and I hated that. And I was like, please don't, let's have some, let's branch off. But they were trying to get SEC out. So I'm glad that they, spread it out that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's, I think that's enough for college football talk because we have a lot to learn from Dan Tilley today. So I want to give him plenty of time. So Dan, how about you just open us up, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of grill you with some questions. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's fine. I really want to start off by thanking the two of you. What a great job you're doing. Appreciate the message that you're sending out to young people. And I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts, and it's just my hat's off to you. And I'm obviously very humbled that you asked me to participate. So this is my first podcast, actually.
Nice.
I do a lot of training and I speak to a lot of people over the course of the year, but I've never done a podcast. So this is pretty cool. Might be my last one after this. So I don't know. You guys are going to have to look after me. But I'd rather talk about my family. I'm married for 27 years, Candace, Tilley. We have two great kids in Claire and Cooper. Claire is married to Johnny. Been, 2.5 years?
Almost.
2 years.
Yes.
Yeah. And my son Cooper just recently got engaged and will be married next November. And so I have an extended family also with Tucker because he married into some very dear friends of ours. And so I just keep getting these bonus people in my life, and I'm super excited about it. And we're very, very fortunate, very blessed that God has put you guys in our life. And I have my son Cooper, but I feel like I picked up two more sons than you guys, and I love watching you guys grow. And you're keeping me young, and it's really fun for us to spend time together and fellowship. So that's about it.
Well, thank you for that, Dan. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
We love being a part of this family.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a huge blessing. So yeah, can't thank you enough for welcoming us into the family. We really appreciate it. Yeah, Johnny, how about you kick us off with your first question?
Yeah, so this whole podcast is going to be about leadership, and Dan, we're going to just go right into these heavy questions. No light work or warm up for this, but the first question that we want to ask you is, what do you think is the hardest part about being a leader, in your opinion and in your experience?
Well, there's a couple of things, and I think a lot of people struggle with a lot of the same things. The first part is accountability. It's tough to hold people accountable. I mean, it's just, when things are going right, it's all good, but, you have somebody that starts breaking the rules, somebody that's not on par with the team. Maybe their performance isn't where it needs to be, maybe their attitude or their behavior. And you've got to hold people accountable. And that was tough for me. And that's something that we really got to make sure we're doing and stay consistent with that. And ultimately, what I had to get wrapped around my head is that as leaders, you promote what you permit. Okay. So if you're permitting something to happen in your organization, and you're not doing anything about it, you're actually promoting it. So that's number one. The next one is delegation. Obviously tough for new leaders because they're in leadership a lot of times because they're very good at what they do. And so, and we'll talk about that in a bit with the multiplying effect, but just delegating. I watch leaders struggle with that all the time, and I did as a young leader. And being able to trust people and hand things off and know that they're going to be taken care of. That's where you have to have those like-minded people that you surround yourself with. So delegation is tough, and it can hurt you from a time management perspective, but also the ability to multiply your leadership, which we'll get to. The funny part for me was the HR side of leadership. I came through sales, so the first 10 years of my career, I was in sales. So very competitive person, wanted to be top salesman of the year. All I cared about was my customers, my immediate team, and everybody else just get out of the way. So I wanted to be race to number one in sales. It's my passion and what I love to do. And then it came along this thing called leadership, and it was a whole nother ball of wax. You guys have heard a lot of times your best salespeople don't make the best sales managers, and there's a lot of truth to that. And so I had to get used to the HR really actually caring about the people around me. I had to learn to listen and intently, and there's a saying that for leadership, a lot of times you have to touch the heart before you ask for the hand, and that was difficult for me because I was so in my world, in my zone of sales, that I had to really learn to listen and care about people and really meet them where they are. And you've heard that term. And, you look at Jesus and what he was able to do, he met people where they were all the time, and he was criticized for it. And so I think it's important, the HR side, to making a connection with people. You got to love them without indulging them, right? So you can't let them go. You got to hold them accountable, but you got to make connection with people. That was a big learning curve for me. And then the last thing is realizing that as a leader, you're the human barometer. It's often said that the office of the organization takes on the flavor of the leader, and you're not allowed to have bad days, and everybody's watching you. And when times are tough, you've got to show resilience. You may not be your best that day. I can't tell you how many times I've, said a small prayer before I walk into the office because I got to get my mind right, and so you got to realize you got to be that duck on the water, right? Yeah, everything's smooth up top, but you're pedaling like crazy underneath, and no one sees it. So you are the human barometer as a leader, and you got to be careful because folks are watching. So
Yeah.
there's the biggest part.
I like that duck analogy. Yeah, like keeping keeping a calm face up front, and no one sees the work you're putting into, and I like that a lot.
Yeah. And man, you said so much good stuff there, but with delegation specifically, I feel like that's a struggle for me too, but I'm curious what you would say on like why most people struggle to delegate. Cause I feel like in my own self-reflection, for me, it's because I don't want to burden other people with stuff. Like I want to just take it on and do it so that somebody else doesn't have to do it.
Two reasons that I hear are very common. Number one, it takes me longer to show somebody else to do it than just to do it myself, right? And number two, no one can do it as good as I can. So that's the big part. And again, I want to get to this multiplier effect because I think it's super, super important, and it speaks towards delegation. Now, the other thing is you got to trust but verify. If you get people around you that you can trust to go carry out these things, and you got to make sure that without micromanaging that you verify things are done. Say, hey, Johnny, when this is done, shoot me a text back that it's done. It's off my list. It's all good. So it is a continual process.
Yeah. And another thing you said that I really liked is that, the organization or whatever it may be, takes on the flavor of the leader. And I've seen that played out in churches all the time, that a church will take on the personality of its lead pastor or whoever is the voice speaking the most into the vision and the culture. It'll kind of take on that personality. And another thing you said is that, you're not allowed to have bad days at the top. And I'm curious what advice you would give, because I know you've found ways to handle that pressure and deal with that pressure, but for a lot of people, that can be a crushing weight to bear, to have that expectation put on them. So what would you say to someone who's kind of dealing with the weight of that?
Well, at the end of the day, I don't know that I would say you're not allowed to. It's just a matter of how you handle it, because we're getting ready to talk about vulnerability as a leader. Okay. And so there's some power in that. But I think you just have to realize that it's windy at the top, and you're that's just where you are. And one of the things I had to get used to as well is I'd walk in a room and everybody'd get quiet, and and the other part is you don't have as many people to talk to when you're a leader, because the room gets really small. And we're going to talk about mentorship and finding that a little bit later, but it's windy at the top, and you just have to realize that all eyes are on you, and that you got to keep a straight face. You got to guide people through the tough time.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah, and I also I've had a lot of bad leaders, and I think for me, especially right out of high school, I think one of my managers, I did not agree with his style of management. And I actually learned from that, though. I learned how he's a bad leader. I learned how to be a good leader from that. But we still have people who make mistakes. Like, they're not perfect, and there's a lot of pressure on them. So, what do you think is the biggest mistake that some leaders make, and how can you, as a leader, avoid them so that you're not viewed as that bad leader?
So glad you asked that, because I want to get into this multiplier thing. I got a couple things. The things that the biggest mistakes leaders make, and I still make them occasionally. All right, and it is continue learning and evolution. But I see it time and time again is that leaders are really a diminisher instead of being a multiplier. Okay, what I mean is we're called to leaders to be multipliers, right? And sometimes when you go to help somebody in leadership, it's called accidental diminisher. You're actually hurting them rather than helping them, because a lot of times, I compare it to like a basketball coach, who still wants to step on the court and hit the three ball, because it feels good. I can still do it, right? And so you want to go in and hit that three ball or close that big sale. Then you want to go in and clean up the mess. it feeds your ego, and you're doing all this stuff, and you think you're helping people, but you're actually not. You're diminishing from their ability and your ability to multiply your leadership through the organization. Overprotecting an employee actually stunts their growth. And when we go back to that multiplying factor, again, I'll bring up Jesus. What a master multiplier he was. I mean, he surrounded himself with 12 disciples. Did that for a reason, right? You got a guy that fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's multiplying extreme. And then you got just the idea that we want to make disciples of all nations. So he had that multiplying effect in a big way, and that's the whole thing. When I was early in leadership, true story, I went to my boss and said, I'm worn out. I feel like I'm failing. He's like, what's wrong? I said, I feel like there's 100 people in the ocean here, and I'm a lifeguard. I can't get to everybody. And he said, your job is not to get to everyone. Your job is to hire and line up lifeguards down the beach so that they can get everybody. And so that was a big impact on me. The next big mistake that you guys may have seen as well is what I call destination disease. That is, I have arrived, right? Worked all my life and finally got this promotion to be manager or leader, or whatever title, whatever it is. And you stop. You got there, and you got my name on the door, my plaque on the desk. I don't think they do that anymore, but yeah, you got a title, and you just kind of stop learning. And one of the things that I learned, particularly in the last 6 or 7 years of my leadership, is that you have to keep learning to stay relevant. You have to adapt to change. You have to make sure that you are in a growth mindset because times are moving very quickly. If you stop learning, then you stop leading. And if you stop leading, then people don't follow you. And if no one's following you, then you're just on a long walk, right? So
I'm writing that down.
I like that.
I'm writing that down.
Learn to be a multiplier and not a diminisher. And number 2 is never get this destination disease. Always understand that you should be in a growth mindset, always learning. And that comes through books, podcasts. There's literally everything. I'm a book guy, right? So I didn't read for a long time. So I've had to learn to read books, and I've got a bunch of them now. I read more in the last 6, 7 years than I've had most of my career, and probably certainly through all of high school. So, that's just the way I learn. I have to write, I'll underline. I'll be on an airplane, or I'll underline it, and I'll write in the margins, and I'll do stuff. So I would encourage you, to continue to progress as a leader, as an adult, whatever level you get to.
Yeah. And earlier you were talking about, some advice you received when you were starting out as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, like if you could give a couple things of what advice did you wish you had when you were first starting out that maybe you didn't get?
Oh boy, there's a long list there. And that's the beauty. I always say that experience is what you have just after you need it, right? And so there's a lot to reflect on. And so what I would tell you is, if I could get into my DeLorean time machine and go back in time and go talk to myself, first thing is you don't have to have all the answers. It's okay to be vulnerable, and we talked about the vulnerability thing. Just because you're the boss or you're the leader, it does not mean you have to have all the answers. And I struggled with that early on, especially when I didn't have the answers. I wasn't quite sure. It's like fake it till you make it. Well, you can't really do that, but it's okay. You're all right. You got to surround people that are really good at what they do, and maybe even better at what they do than you do. So I would say take the pressure off the fact that you don't have to have all the answers. It's okay to be vulnerable, right? And that would be probably the big thing. The next one I just picked up actually a couple of months ago. I saw this short clip as the Duke women's basketball coach talked about, quit working towards easy and get better at hard. That's one of the things I tell myself, because school is like, well, if I can just get to the spring semester, if I just get to my senior year, it'll be easy. And now in working world, if I can just get more sales, if I can hire 3 more people, there's always something that I need a cadence. I'm just all over the place. I can't get my to-do list done. If I could just get this down, life would be easy. Stop working towards easy and just get better at hard. Just get better at hard. So I would tell myself that for sure. and this one's my favorite one, and I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. Quit giving yourself a hall pass for things you're not good at. I'd go back in time when my hair was brown and I was a young man and say, look, man, don't give yourself a hall pass for things you are not good at. And that's a missed learning opportunity. So one of the things I tell you guys and anybody that's listening is, we all have things we're not very good at. People talk about strengths and weaknesses. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What I say is I got a strength, but then I have things I need to work on. They're not weaknesses anymore, because what happens is, whether it's public speaking, whether it's writing, for a lot of people, including me, it's math. I'm just not very strong at numbers, never was in school. But we have all these people, teachers, our parents, our kids at the bus stop, whoever it is, we've created these old movies of things that we're not very good at. And so what happens is you just start saying, well, I don't like public speaking, so I'm not going to do it. Or I'm terrible at reading reports, so I'll just put that off, and I just won't know how to do that. And what happens is you're missing an opportunity. Doesn't mean you're going to be great at it, but you have to get to the point where you're getting better at it. And so quit giving yourself a hall pass on things you're not good at. Learn to work on them and get rid of the old movies and start creating some new movies of yourself. So that one's very important.
I mean, I'm writing all these quotes down right now on my notebook. I mean, you need to start making a book, Dan. But I want to go back to what you said earlier. You said overprotecting an employee will stunt their growth, and I realized, like, I had a job one time where anytime that like the lead manager was out, like the entire place was like in flames, basically, And so, but when he was here, it was calm, and at first I was like, man, he's a really good manager because every time he's here, it's calm. But then I'm like, no, like he's not actually, because he's not leaving. He's not multiplying, like you said earlier. He's not leading it. Like he's not leaving anybody to take his spot. He's not teaching anybody. He's not mentoring anybody. He wants the spotlight for himself. And it took me a long time to realize that. And I think maybe some guys listening to that might have that viewpoint as well. And so can you go like a little more detail on that, on like how you need to like leave good managers even after you're gone? I know that if that makes sense.
Well, there's a saying that success without succession is failure. I've experienced that in my professional life. It's not easy. And so what happens is, you talk about backfill, you talk about, growing your bench. That's what I love about business. There's so many parallels to sport, and I pull from that. You got to have a good bench. You got to have a good number 2, number 3, and that's, always be developing your people, and that's a hard thing to do, because not everybody, wants to be a leader. Not everybody's particularly good at it or cut out for it. But I think you could always have that number 2. Who's working on their bench, and who's got people that are in line to step in and get better. And the problem is, if you take all the glory and you're doing everybody's job, you're not growing anyone, then you're not developing your bench. And so when you're out, either through retirement or somebody decides they're going to retire you, they're in a mess, because there's really no one developed. There's no one being developed behind that lead. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that does. Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely. I mean, again, there's so many parallels, but I feel like you see that in the church world a lot. Really healthy churches will have like a succession plan in place that's like over, a few years while they're training up the person that's going to take over. And then there's like this healthy handoff. But in unhealthy churches, it's the lead pastor retires. There's no plan.
Right.
There's like this leadership void for a while. And it can create a lot of issues. And it's just that, like, it's great if you can build something that's successful, that has a lot of positive momentum. Like, that's awesome. But if it all hinges on you and your personality, then it's a very short-sighted window of success, because it's not thinking, beyond your tenure there. So yeah, I really like that you highlighted that for everybody, because that can be so easily overlooked, because we get so like laser focused and like almost like a horse with, blinders on, that we just get locked in on our day-to-day task, and we can lose sight of kind of the long game.
Well, you can, and I can tell you right now, real life, real stories, which is what I love to tell, because it makes things real and relevant, right? Instead of just a PowerPoint. But we can't grow right now as a company. We're having a hard time growing geographically because we've not developed a bench over the last 10 years and developed those leaders to give us an opportunity to expand. So we're suffering from that big time right now because we just don't have the depth right now in order to grow the way we want to. So it's a real deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, real life stuff. That's really awesome. Would you say, in the same vein of conversation, would you say it's okay for someone to not want to be a leader, or should everyone have that as a goal?
Yeah, great question. First, what I will tell you is that leaders are anybody that influences others, okay? The other thing I'll tell you is there is a tremendous amount of power in self-awareness for those people that realize that leadership may not be for them. Yet it takes a lot more for a person to realize that and be self-aware. You know, that society puts, everything on you. You know, you're not successful unless you climb the ladder of this or that, and you get titles of this, and it all points to leadership. But there's a couple individuals in my organization, and I won't bring their names into it, but and they're dynamite employees, and they're wildly successful in their career. And one of these guys was really dubbed to be a manager of one of our operations, and he was just kind of getting pushed into this thing, and everybody thought he was the greatest, and you're going to take over, and you're going to be the next guy. And he finally hit the brakes several years ago and said, I don't really want that at all. I don't want the adult daycare of leadership in a professional office or whatever, where we were. And we were all like, well, geez, that doesn't make sense because we all think you'd be perfect for it. But the power of self-awareness, he says, I'm good. I'm good. And turns out we had a new position created for him a couple of years ago, and he is relishing in that role. Does that make him not a leader? Absolutely not, because he's leading exactly in this role and what he's doing. It's just not over a lot of people. So what I can tell you is that people get into leadership for the wrong reason. I've seen it, right? It's, again, I go back to what I said earlier, just because you're good in sales doesn't make you a great sales manager. People fail all the time at that. And so you got to look at your reasoning for getting into leadership and be honest with yourself. Is it the title? Is it the money? The perception and prestige? What is that? A lot of people like the responsibility of leadership, but they don't want the accountability of leadership. And so, yeah, when I interview people for leadership roles, I always want to know why. Why do you want to get into this? I want to make sure the reason's right. Okay. If you're not that leader, so to speak, or that title, you can still be the leader of your 20 square feet, right? Be the leader of your own 20 square feet to help influence others. So at that point, the whole power of self-awareness is listening to your purpose and passion. What do you really want to do? And this individual that I was describing to you that turned down running this office he listened to his purpose and passion and said, that's just not what you guys think I should be doing. And he has just done very well, and he's just swimming in his purpose and passion every day. And so what I would tell you is the mistake is not to not perceive leadership. That's not the mistake. The mistake is to not listen to your purpose and passion. So I hope I answer your question, but that's kind of where we are on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Well, and so just tell me saying personal stories. I've had a lot of jobs, and I've had jobs where, like you said, Dan, a guy is doing phenomenal at his position, and then they give him a promotion and he's off. Yeah. And so what do you, when that happens, when that switch happens, just going back to kind of Tucker's point, is when someone's doing really good and then they get promoted and then they're really bad, what do you do there? How do you pivot there? Is the next step to be to demote that person, or should someone take them under their wing and say, hey, listen, you did really good here, let's correct a few things? What's the best approach when that scenario happens?
Well, first of all, my question will be, what do you have in terms of leadership development? Okay, did you just walk in one day and hit them over the head with a wand and now you're a leader?
Right.
Okay, and then you leave.
Right.
I was kind of thrown into the deep end 100 years ago when I was thrown into leadership. That's just where that was my leader at the time. It's his personality. It's how he grew up, and he was just, you just sink or swim, and you go. And that's tough because the first 3 years I was lousy. I mean, no one taught me how to interview someone. No one taught me how to hire somebody. I made some lousy hires the first 3 or 4 years. So those are all skills that I had to learn and had to develop. So the responsibility on that person, if you've got somebody that you've promoted, but you're not promoting them or you're not supporting them through development and training, the success rate of that person is not going to be very high to begin with. Second of all, if you've not really recognized that, the purpose and passion, is that person really good at it? It's a thing called the Peter principle. And I don't know the exact quote, but basically the principle is that you get promoted one step past where you really should be. A lot of people, that principle is in place for a reason, because some people just get one step too far and they fail. And that's where that self-awareness comes in, and you have to really look at, okay, why do I want this job? And really, what am I going to have to do to be developed? So the other thing I'd tell you is that if you're not prepared to offer some form of mentorship and continued training, then you really don't have any business promoting that person. And a lot of people get promoted because the guy in front of them wants to go to another job, and so there's a lot of bad decisions in leadership and motivations and why people do what they do. But I think the big part of it is offering the mentorship and the development. For me, having somebody tuck me under their arm was very helpful, and I learned a lot, and I failed forward a lot. And of course, everybody knows you learn more from your mistakes and your successes. But it was what I was willing. I had somebody willing and patient with me to fail forward and realize that I had to acquire some of these skills, and I had to work on it in terms of what's going on. And by the way, it never stopped. Even at my level now, I'm constantly learning and constantly surrounding myself with people to help make decisions. I can go into a room now and say, and I do this all the time, I don't have to be right when I start this meeting. Okay, I don't have to be right, but I don't want to leave here being wrong. And so what that means is I need everybody around me to pitch in. This is, it takes a team and takes all that. So I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole.
No,
but I think to answer your question, it's about mentorship and development. And those are the two key things.
Yeah, that's good, because I right now, I'm a teacher, and I've been wanting to be a teacher for a while. And as soon as my first day of teaching, I sat in that classroom in front of students, and I was like, oh, I've been wanting to do this, but I have no idea what I'm doing now. And I had a teacher friend, and she was like right next door to me when I first started, and she said, hey, just come to my classroom, let me show you the ropes, let me take you under my wing. And she still is I go to her for everything now. And she took that time. She didn't have to, but she took the time to mentor me. And I'm not an amazing teacher, but the level that I'm at is because of her. It's not because of the education that I've had. It's because of her taking the time to mentor me, to make me become a good leader. So I love that mentorship part.
Well, here's what I'll tell you. The best advice I can give you, my old man advice, as I call it, is, and I told both my kids this. I told Claire, I told Cooper. I'm sure I've told you guys. If you don't have a mentor at work, you need to find one as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to figure it out on your own. And a lot of I don't care how ambitious or smart you are. It is imperative that you find the person that is on that track, that's going the right way, the mover, the shaker, things you can learn, and get that person to mentor you if they're willing. Some aren't, but most are, because it's only going to develop them as a leader, and it cuts your learning curve in half, and at least that, and it keeps you from making a lot of mistakes that are a lot of times costly, not only from people's time, but also financially to your company or your organization. So big on mentorship for sure.
Yeah, and one thing you said that I love is just about how they can lead in their 20. I think you said 20 square feet. I love that, because I think that's an important distinction to make. Is we're not saying that men shouldn't strive to be leaders in a general sense. We're saying not everybody's meant to manage people, I think, is kind of what we're getting at.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think it's an important distinction to make, because I think as men, we're created to lead. Now, whether that's in a sales position or a CEO position, you're still a leader.
That's right.
It's just a different type of leading. And like at home with your family, you can lead there. If you volunteer to coach a sports team, your leadership is really important there.
That's right.
In your church, you can be a leader. In whatever it may be, you can lead the pack on a lot of things without having a title that is viewed by the world as a leadership position. And in a lot of ways, I actually think leading from lower positions can have more impact because you're elbow to elbow with the people and they're not looking at you in a different way because you have that title.
Right.
So I think that's really important as well.
Well, I think again, let's touch on the fact that it's hard because society puts all this stuff on you, right? And this is what you're supposed to do. So this is what success looks like, and it's the self-awareness is so powerful. If young people can look and say, I really need to examine what the purpose is, and if it's not being a leader of people or getting involved in all this stuff, there's a lot to it. It is really, really impactful to listen to your purpose and passion and have the self-awareness to taste what that is, even though it may not have that title to it. And it is important to be the leader of your family, the leader of your community and the leader at church and all these different things. So I think that self-awareness is very important.
Yeah, and to echo off of what you and Tucker are saying, Dan, is there's a quote, kind of what Tucker was saying is natural born leaders. Is that you hear this guy's a natural born leader.
Yeah.
This guy
Yeah.
he has that, but then there's still some guys who are at their workplace or maybe even like at their home or on their sports team, and they're just like, I just don't feel like I'm a leader. Maybe I'm supposed to be it, but I don't feel like it. So
Yeah.
what is a skill that they can develop, or like can someone who does not feel, can they become a leader if they don't feel like they are?
Yeah. So the question is, are you a natural born leader or can you be developed as a leader?
Right.
And or if you have leadership thrust upon you, which is what happened to me. There is no either or. The answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I think there are natural born leaders. I've seen them. We see them as early as elementary and middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Just some kids just lead. But it doesn't make them a great leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can be a natural born terrible leader if they're not developed. So the key word is development. Whether you have leadership thrust upon you, whether you come out of your mother's womb a leader and you're flying the flag and leading a charge, you have to have development one way or the other. And a lot of that has to do with all the things we've been talking about today. You don't have to do it on your own. It's okay not to have all the right answers. It's your job to multiply yourself, okay? And quit taking credit for everything. It needs to be to the point where you are more excited about that young man shooting the 3-point shot than it is you hitting it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. That's tough. And that's a journey that you have to go on and get. And then, by the way, if you get them on that journey, it doesn't stop. We have to get better at hard. Quit working towards easy. You have to evolve. You have to keep changing. You have to have a growth mindset. It's not the strong or the smart that survive. It's those that can adapt to change, and it becomes harder the older you get. Because the older you get, you don't like change, and so you feel like, okay, I've made it this far. I got destination disease. I'm just going to cruise. And you might be able to cruise for a little while, but unfortunately, the world doesn't stop turning, and neither does your competitor. And so you keep on cruise control for too long, they're going to catch you and they'll pass you.
Mm-hmm. No, I actually, talking about leaders as young as middle school, I just storied last week this kid, and he's been the crazy kid, and no teacher's been able to figure out how to control him. And I told him, hey, go outside, let's talk in the hallway. And I said, hey, man, you are a leader in that classroom. And he was like, no, I'm not. And I said, yes, you are. I said, in a bad way you are, though. I said, when you act up, the whole class acts up. And so I said, do you know the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat? And he said, no, what is it? And I said, a thermometer is controlled by the temperature. A thermostat sets a temperature. So I need you to set a temperature to be like a positive and have the kids like behave. because I'm sure that when you behave, they will follow your lead. Because I know when you or when you're not behaving, the kids are doing the same thing. So help me help all the rest of the class and behave, and let's see what happens. So then the next day, he does that and he behaves and he goes, Mr. Gardner, the class was good today. And I said, yeah, because you were. And he was like, I didn't think I was a leader. I said, I know you're 11 years old, but you are a leader. And
That's right.
hopefully that helps him out in the future, but it helps me out in my classroom. So it helps
That's
out.
good.
Yeah,
I love
to
it.
just
That's a great
piggyback
story.
on the real life stories, we had two of my longtime friends, Josh and Alex, on the podcast. I think it was a couple weeks ago, and Josh is the perfect example of what we're talking about. He has had like the characteristics of a leader for I don't even know how long, but I've recognized it and seen it. And man, it just feels like now that they've started their own company, all of that is like coming to fruition. And it's just so cool to see him thrive in that and like grow and learn. And it's just been really cool to see. And, it's easy to spot people like that who kind of, it's just written on the wall. But it's also really cool when you can like identify someone who is really, really good at something and does move the needle without like it being easily recognizable. Like someone who's more of a behind the scenes person, but is really having a big impact on the people around them. I always think that's really cool to hear those stories as well.
Yeah, and I think probably and we haven't talked about this, but probably the biggest and one of the most difficult things for new leaders or people that are considering it is, it's a lesson that was learned in the old Pixar movie Bug's Life. You remember that when you guys were little?
Oh, yeah.
And I was a new leader back then, and I remember watching it. Of course, these animated things, they put music and phrases not for the kids. They're trying to get the parents, right? So I was watching that with my kids, and it said, first rule of management: everything is your fault. And there's a lot of truth to that. And you have to be able to accept responsibility. You have to be the one that, look, I didn't do this, okay, but I'm responsible for it. That's why a lot of people want the title and they want the name and the job, but they have a hard time accepting, well, no, I didn't do that. I had a true story real quick. We had early on in leadership, very early on, and my boss came to me and said, hey, this guy's got a job that's overspent. They've got this thing that's a big problem, and I need, here's the report. We're negative so many thousands of dollars, and you need to tell me what's going on. And I said, well, Tim's right over there. It's his job. Why don't you ask him? And he looked at me and he said, you don't understand. It's your fault. Everything that happens in this office, you're responsible for. And so that's tough, because, a lot of adults have a hard time with accountability. A lot of adults have a hard time saying it's my fault. They spend too much time and energy trying to blame the other person because they just don't want to don't want to be wrong. And that's the big thing for me. Once I realized it was okay to take responsibility, I'm now making my income through the actions of other people, which is pretty scary, right? And so now I have to say that everything is on me, because a lot of times when things go wrong, people just want somebody to blame. They want somebody to take accountability. And I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a meeting and people getting screamed at, and I said, if you want somebody to blame me, because it's my job. I'm responsible for all of this. Now that we've got that over with, let's go solve the problem. But I'm telling you, that accountability is a big deal, and it's very hard for people. And it's a big transition to look and say, you know what, Sally really screwed this up, but I got to get on the phone and apologize and tell people it was my fault. That's a transition.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think that goes beyond just the work environment, but it translates to all of life. And we actually talked about that same thing in our mental toughness and resilience episode, but we talked about like the cause and effect equation, and we want to be on the cause side of things. Like, even if something's being done to us, we want to be at cause. We want to say, I'm taking responsibility for what I'm going to do next in response to this outside thing happening to me. And that's empowerment. Like, when you can start to quit playing the blame game and stop trying to push all the problems off on other people and just try and prop yourself up, when you can humble yourself and die to yourself and say, no, this is on me. I'm going to take responsibility for what happens moving forward, even though I may not have been the one to push the first domino over. I'm going to prevent the rest from stopping. And I think that's a really powerful shift people can make, not only in their professional life, but also in their personal life.
That's right. And I, the word I use is liberating. I found it very liberating for me once I made that, I got over that fact, and I realized just how quickly you can distinguish, problems and disagreements. And, I'm in the construction world, so we got a lot of guys that like to scream and you use bad language and all that. So it's a really great way to diffuse it. And when you can harness that, it is extremely liberating for you and for everyone around.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dan, all of this stuff has been just really great. And that's why we wanted to have you on. I knew you had so many like one-liners, and like Johnny said, you definitely should write a book at some point.
Well,
we also know you didn't get this from nowhere. So, what would you say some of the biggest resources that have had an impact on you? Some resources where you've learned, some of these things you're talking about that you would recommend to other people.
Yeah, I tell people I'm probably the biggest thief in the world. I'm a robber of ideas. And I belong to a group called Vistage that I'm very blessed to be in. It's professional leadership that my company puts me in. I've learned to read books. We talked about that earlier. I've learned to have a growth mindset. Man, it's especially the older you get, it's just you don't take that extra time. But I've really become a student of having growth mindset, and I'm not a speed reader. I'm not a super reader. I've got 3 or 4 books on my nightstand that are I have about halfway through them, and my wife's like, "Are you ever going to finish these? You get them out of here." So, but I always have to have something now, and it's something somebody told me 6-7 years ago that in 5 years the difference in your life will be the people you meet and the book you read. And I kind of scoffed at that, and I thought that's kind of cute, right? But I'm telling you, it has had a big impact on me. And so what I do is I do a lot of journaling in my office. So I'll write a lot of stuff down. This is the way my brain works. I remember a lot of little things and whatnot. And some of them I completely rip off of people that I study. And then some of it, it just comes to me. So I'm kind of born weird that way. But what I'll tell you is the number one book I tell everyone. It's called Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's been around, 70 plus years.
It's a great book.
By Dale Carnegie. And some people are like, well, I'm not in sales. Everyone's in sales. I gave this book to my brother who was early on in his chiropractic career and starting a business. And he's dealing with public. He saw 60 people every day at one point. And he said, this book had a huge impact on me because it helped me relate to people. It's been around for a long time for a reason. So How to Win Friends, Influence People by Dale Carnegie, right out of the chute. Not read that, you need to. Very powerful. And wherever you are in life, not just professionally, but personally. There's a book by Michael Hyatt called Free to Focus. I read that one 3 years ago. Huge impact on me for a lot of reasons. I could do a whole podcast on this book. Free to Focus, Michael Hyatt is very basic, common sense, time management, focus management stuff. This is where I got into the passion and purpose. Find your passion and purpose and focus. You got to allow yourself to get focused there. And so that comes from that book. And then we talked about multipliers a lot. And that was a book called Liz Wiseman. And it's simply called Multipliers. If you're in leadership, probably more relevant now than if you're thinking about getting into leadership, or maybe you're there and you're stuck. And this was really a good way for me to understand that I was diminishing some of the folks that I was coaching because I was doing too much for them. And it's the old adage, I can either catch fish for you or I can teach you to fish. So we got to teach people to fish. And then again, just anything that's available that's out there now, the podcasts and all the stuff that you young bucks are out there doing. But you have to have the growth mindset to tune into that stuff. And then last thing I tell you, and I've said it before, is if you do not have a mentor right now in your life, personally and professionally, go get one as fast as you can. It is the best thing that you can do. So that's kind of it. I've got a bunch of books, but those 3 is what I'd recommend.
No, thank you. And to our listeners, we'll post these books on our social media so you can see them all. And And also to our listeners, I hope you had a pen and paper for this episode, because I sure wrote a ton down. And Dan, I mean, I've known you for a long time, but I learned even more today. And so thank you again. Yes.
No, it's great. When I tell people I walk into a training session, I'm so glad to hear you're writing stuff down, because I can't tell you, I walk in and there's people there, some guys in the back of the room or wherever they are, they had to sit there with their phone, right? There's nothing to write on. There's nothing. And I always start my training with this. And if I see that, I'll say, you need to have something to write, a pad of paper, a piece of pencil, or a piece of paper. You need to take notes, because if you came here without something to write down on, you came in here to be entertained, and I'm not here to entertain. So thank you for writing that down. That makes an old guy smile.
I got you right here. All good. Even highlighted some stuff. Yes.
All right.
Yeah, and honestly, Dan, you could have teed that up, and I could have said it for you, because that's one thing you've said that has always stuck with me is if you came here without something to write, you came to be entertained, and that's not what it's for. So
no,
we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I remember, I don't even know how long I had been married to Haley, but it was not very long after that you told me about how to win friends and influence people, and you were like, you need to read this, and I think you gave me a copy, and I read it, and it definitely was a game changer. And to our listeners, just so you know, Dan is not a guy who like would read that book and be like, oh, there's some great stuff in here, and it would just stay like in his brain, but he actually lives this out. I mean, when we go to restaurants, when we're out in public, he's getting to know people's names because he knows, how much that matters. And it's really cool to see that. So Dan, just thank you for taking the time to be on today, for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I can't thank you enough, just personally, how much of a help you've been to me when I was navigating a lot of my, career situations and trying to figure out what my purpose and passion is. That was a long journey for me, and you really helped me a lot through that. So thank you so much.
It's all good. I tell people we're just living life together, right? So, and I'm not done growing. I draw strength from you guys as well, so it goes both ways. You need to know that. I have not figured it all out yet, and I fail forward every day.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we said this on the previous episode, where I think Tucker said it, but be an active listener always. That's one mark of being a man, is being an active listener. And Dan, you are showing
What'd you say?
Being an active listener. I didn't catch on that one. But Dan, but Dan's showing that, like, that's one like aspect of what it means to be a man, is being an active listener. And he's saying that he is still not done learning yet. And I'm out learning, catching on jokes. So
just to clarify, Johnny, do you mean active listener or do you mean active learner?
What'd you say? Oh, did I say listener?
You said listener.
Oh my gosh, there's it was active learner. That's what it was.
You went a while without not saying.
Dang, this whole podcast, I didn't
stuff wrong.
I didn't mess up. Yeah, active learner.
You're overdue.
Yeah, so be an active learner like Dan. Not yes.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Wait
and go be a dog today like Dan.
Yes, and go be there for your dogs like Dan.